All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking the evening to join us and be here. My name's Rita Fleming, for those of you that don't know me, and my background is in regenerative health. And the reason I got into this was to transform my own body and my own life. When I was 19, I was in a near-death car accident. I broke 16 bones. I couldn't walk for a year and a half, and I struggled with chronic pain for 12 years. And I looked for solutions everywhere to get out of chronic pain. And I didn't have much success. I would have a lot of my symptoms reduce or some of the inflammation go away, but I was still in chronic pain. So it wasn't getting to the root cause. So then I learned about the principles of regenerative health, and I was able to get out of chronic pain. And one of the tools that I used in my studies was iridology. And iridology is looking at our eyes. So we can take a picture of our eyes and look at the tissues up close. And your eyes are a map of your entire body, and it's incredibly accurate. So here's a little map or chart of your eyes. And each part of your eye represents a different organ system, also shows the health of your tissues and your lymphatic system. And these things are passed down from multiple generations. So we're going to dive in and look at some examples of eyes today. This is just for educational purposes, but I found it to be incredibly insightful and empowering. And through looking at my own eyes, I was able to make leaps and bounds in my well-being, and, in my mother's and my sister's, and create that generational healing. So let's go ahead and dive into some examples, and then I will open it up for questions at the end. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Okay, can everybody see this well? Cool. Okay, I just like this quote. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. So there's so much that we can learn about ourselves through our eyes. And I want to do this first picture is just an example. And I'm curious, go ahead and put it in the chat. What is the true color of this eye, do you think? Is it brown? Is it blue? I see. Okay, so blue looks hazel, brown, hazel. Okay, great. So there's actually two colors to eyes, two true colors. There's blue eyes and there's brown eyes. And this is a true blue eye. And we can see some of the blue coming through. But what we also see is this rust color, this orange. And that orange is actually a congestion of sulfur and toxins in the tissues in the body. And it has a lot to do with our gut health here. And these toxins get passed down for multiple generations. So this could be a buildup of a lot of like sulfur drugs, pharmaceuticals, all different kinds of things. But these toxins, this bright orange, this brown, it gets stored in our lymphatic system. And our lymphatic system is our main sewage system, waste system, immune system. It's where all the toxic buildups end up. And so we're going to talk about how to clean up our lymphatic system tonight, because cleaning up the lymphatic system actually determines the health of all of our organs, glands, and tissues. And so the area where it's a little bit green, that is yellow on top of blue eyes. So green eyes are actually an example of subacute lymphatic congestion, where you see it's blue with white on top of it. There's not a lot of white here, but with white on top of it, it's acute lymphatic congestion. So acute lymphatic congestion just means it hasn't been around for very long. Subacute lymphatic congestion means that lymphatic congestion and stagnation has been around for multiple generations. And then do you see where it's a darker brown on top of the blue eyes? That's actually chronic lymphatic congestion, which just means it's going to take longer to clean up, and it's been around for more generations. So that's an intro. And then can you guys see the tissues of this eye? It's very tight knit, and I'll show a different example, but this is representing a really strong constitution because the fibers are all close together. They're tightly woven. Here's another example of a strong constitution. So this is super strong because you see all the tissues are very close together. The strongest constitutions I've seen, I've read hundreds and hundreds of eyes, are in our grandparents' generation. And that's because they've been exposed to less toxins throughout, less generations exposed to toxins. And so we see that in the strength of the tissue. So here is an example. Do you see there's a bunch of openings? This is an example of a weak constitution. And, those of us that are blessed with the strong constitution, you can get away with most things. So these are the people, like, say your grandparents, they were drinking Jack Daniels and smoking until their 90s, and they were just fine and great and never really had a health problem. People with a strong constitution can get away with a lot more. People with a weaker constitution, where you have these openings in the eyes, it's hard. Can you guys see this okay? Shannon was trying to say something.
Someone has a question about what constitution means.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, constitution is really just your genetic inheritance. And so that strong constitution is these tissues that are tightly woven. And then a weaker constitution has these openings in the eyes. And these openings we'll get into, but they represent different organ systems. So a weaker constitution person can't get away with as much, and they can strengthen their genetics and strengthen their tissues, which we'll talk about how to strengthen our tissues. But a weaker constitution person is going to deal with more injuries, injuring themselves more easily. It takes longer to recover, longer to repair. And then these openings represent different weaknesses in our organs and tissues, which we'll get into. And for some reason, it's not showing the text clearly, sorry. But does anybody see these rings in the eye? It's kind of like the rings of a tree. So these rings in your eye actually represent your nervous system health. And our nervous system, or like Saturn, yeah, our nervous system is a reflection of our adrenal gland health. And so we're going to dive into that, but your adrenal glands are in charge of reducing inflammation in your body. They're in charge of your reproductive health, your reproductive organs. If we see lymphatic congestion, so this white on top of the blue is acute lymphatic congestion. So they do need to clean up their lymphatic system, but it's not as long-standing. So there's not going to be such an inflammatory response as with chronic lymphatic congestion. So when you get lymphatic congestion combined with adrenal weakness, that's when you start to see such inflammatory conditions as arthritis, all of these inflammatory itises that comes as a result. So when I started this, my adrenal glands were shot. They were destroyed from that trauma of the accident. And so I had deep, dark rings that I was able to regenerate. And now I just have very subtle light rings. So my eyes have come leaps and bounds, and I see it in my nervous system, and I also don't have chronic pain anymore. So that balance, the reason I was able to reach that equation was cleaning up the lymphatic system and supporting the adrenal gland health. And so we'll talk about ways to do that. Here are some more examples. Up here is your eye, and here's the pupil, obviously. And you can see this little ridge. Can everybody see where I'm tracing this blue dot? So around the pupil is actually your colon, like the top is your transverse colon, and then you have your small intestines and your cecum, and then your ascending colon here. And so there's a little dip here. I don't know if you guys can see that, where the tissue is reaching towards this pupil. And this dip is showing a prolapse of the colon, of the transverse colon. And so that's showing us that we have a connective tissue weakness. And so the strength of our connective tissue actually has to do with our parathyroid gland. So your parathyroid gland, which is represented right here, is in charge of all of your calcium utilization and absorption. So when our parathyroid gland is weakened, and we can see that there's a darkness right there, that's a weakening of that tissue. And we'll talk about how to strengthen that tissue because we can. But the weakening of that tissue, it impacts the function of our parathyroid gland. And so our parathyroid gland, if we have a weak one, which I do, that's what I inherited from my mom's side and my dad's side, because again, we can pass down our genetics, but we can strengthen and transform our genetics. And so a weakened parathyroid can look like such things as varicose veins, prone to injury because we're not utilizing our calcium well. It can look like sagging skin and wrinkles because of a lack of collagen production. It can look like these organ prolapses that we see here. Scoliosis, like I said, my mom's side, everyone on my mom's side had pretty severe scoliosis. And my mom would cry herself to sleep at night because she had such painful scoliosis. And then she worked really hard through alignment and yoga to strengthen and balance out her spine. But it wasn't until we started working on supporting and regenerating her parathyroid gland that now you can't even see any scoliosis. And the same for me. After my car accident and injuries, my spine was pulled all the way to the left, and like the whole left was very it was just hard and protruding outwards, and the whole right side was completely concaved. And so I had a ton of work to do with my parathyroid, which we'll talk about how to support that. But now my spine is in balance and it's in a healthy place. It's no longer pulled over. And so as we really strengthen these tissues and these organs, your body can pull itself back into place. And so that's what's very exciting about all of this. And then, our parathyroid gland, that calcium utilization, it also impacts our mood. So if we have a weak parathyroid gland, we're going to experience depression and other things. So these are kind of the tissues. Sorry, you can't see this. You could see it earlier when I made it, but these are some of the herbs that are really good for lungs. I can send this out to people, but see where it's dark in here? This is showing a lung weakness. And so things that we can do to support the lungs are, one, clean up the lymphatic system, which we'll talk about how to do. But when we clean up the lymphatic system, that strengthens all the tissues of our body. And our body is made up of trillions of cells and lymphatic fluid. And so the way that we strengthen those cells is cleaning up the lymphatic system and bringing more oxygen and nutrients to the cells. So we'll talk more about that. All right. Would love to see before and after of your eyes. Yes, definitely. We can get into that. So here is an example of your pineal gland. And the health of your pineal gland is directly related to the health of your gut. Again, and we'll go into this, but this is the transverse colon right here. And so when this gets congested, it actually those toxins impact the pineal gland. And same with the pituitary gland. This is a pituitary gland. And your pineal gland is what produces melatonin. So that helps us to sleep. That gets us into the deep rest cycles. And then the pituitary gland is in charge of all of our endocrine system. So pretty much all the functions of our body, our hormonal balance comes back to this pituitary health. So the first thing that we have to do to support our pituitary gland is clean up this transverse colon. And so those of you that are on our transformation, our New Year's transformation, you're working with our biomedic, and that's our gut support. And what that helps to do is helps you to absorb those nutrients and over time really support those tight junctions so that we're not getting that leaky gut. And when our gut leaks, all the toxins leak into our lymphatic system. And we're going to learn more about how that impacts all the tissues in the body. But it also, when we have a leaky gut, it crosses that blood-brain barrier and those toxins get into our nervous system. So we'll talk more about that too. But on that subject of the biomedic too, that first one we looked at with all of this sulfur, I used to have really intense sulfur. Again, it was passed down from multiple generations. Biomedic was the only thing that worked to grab onto that sulfur and start getting rid of it. I had done so many other herbs to address that, and it just hadn't gotten to it. So that's really neat. Okay. So this outside ring, you guys can see this dark outer ring. This represents our largest organ of elimination, and that's our skin. So our organs of elimination, one is our kidneys. And the reason that our kidneys are so important is because that's the kidney pathway to eliminate all of those lymphatic waste and all of that lymphatic congestion. So we see the white here is really thick lymphatic congestion. And this thick lymphatic congestion is what leads to an inflammatory response throughout the body. And that's what starts to break down these tissues. So we see these openings, and these are tissues that have been weakened by that lymphatic congestion. And we see an opening over here as well. And then this yellow or brown, now we're getting into more subacute and chronic lymphatic congestion in these areas. So this area, looking at the right eye, this area over here, we're looking at like all of this is the head region, but then we start to get into the upper jaw, the nose, the tonsils, and then over here, we start to get into the thyroid gland, where there's that big opening. And so the way that you start to repair that thyroid gland is, one, you start to clean up the lymphatic system by getting those kidneys filtering. And the best way to clean up your lymphatic system and get your kidneys filtering is through your astringent fruits. So your berries, your cherries, your pineapple, oranges, citrus. And the reason for that is these astringent fruits, they're very cleansing. And you can imagine like wringing out a sponge. That's what the astringent fruits do to our body, and they clean that lymphatic system up. And if you're in our transformation right now, the bio fruit is one of my absolute favorite lymphatic cleansers because it's full of astringent fruits. And then the tart cherry juice that many of you have, those are also going to really open up that kidney elimination channel so that we can start cleaning up this lymphatic waste. And then that tart cherry is also going to support that pineal gland and that melatonin production. So neat to see the body at this level. And Mary, no, these are not my eyes. These are just a collection of different eyes. So we get into the skin. So we have our skin as one of our organs of elimination. And the best way to support that is by sweating, getting into a sauna, dry brushing. If our skin is not eliminating properly, we'll get this big scurf ring. And that means our toxins are not properly eliminating, which again is going to impact the health of all the organs. So sweat, get outside. And the other organs, we talked about the kidneys as elimination, your bowels or another organ of elimination, and your lungs. So getting outside, deep breathing, your lungs eliminate so much waste. So we want to support all of those organs of elimination to clean up our eyes. Okay. So this was showing the thyroid weakness, and also next to it, we have a parathyroid weakness. And so when we have that parathyroid weakness, we see a couple of things. But first, let's go back to that thyroid weakness, because the reason I wanted to point that out is anytime there's a scurf ring, which organ is in charge of our sweating? Anyone know? It's our thyroid. So anytime there's a scurf ring, you know that there's a thyroid weakness. And so here's that scurf ring. So I always go and check the thyroid and like, okay, we need to support that. And the way that we support that is through cleaning up that lymphatic system, getting those organs of elimination open, supporting those kidneys. And you guys can see this, but there's a white ring right around that dark opening. And that lymphatic congestion, what it does is it stops circulation and nutrients from going into that tissue area. And in this case, it's the thyroid. And so the way that you regenerate that is you clean up that lymphatic system and you alkalize the body. So the most alkalizing foods are like your dark greens, like your alfalfa juice, your wheatgrass juice, your fruits and all of those. So when we get the body alkaline and we try and aim for like an 80% input of alkaline nutrients, which have alkaline minerals when you're aiming for regeneration. And what that does is it allows for the cells to absorb nutrients, and it allows for the cells to eliminate toxins when we get in that alkaline terrain. And when we're in an acidic environment, which is 90 to 99% of the foods that we eat today are acid forming. And what that does, if you were to look under a microscope at your cells, you would see all of your cells clumped and congested together, meaning those nutrients can't get in and those toxins can't get out. And what happens then is we start to see that cellular weakening, that cellular weakness, which translates into these different tissue weaknesses. So to strengthen the tissues, clean up the lymphatic system, alkalize the body, and make sure that your cells are receiving enough simple sugars and oxygen to create cellular ATP. And my favorite, got a few more people coming in. My favorite thing that we're working with for those of us in the transformation that can't beat this, has amazing herbs in it, and alkalizing foods that increase that production of cellular ATP. It increases your oxygen and it increases your alkalinity, and it helps those cells to create cellular energy. And that's when our cells go into cellular repair. So those are some important, just foundational things to think of when you're cleaning up the different organs and tissues. So cleaning up the lymphatic system, and in that dark area, you actually will start to see these healing lines where it stitches itself back together as that organ, gland, and tissue strengthens. So step one, clean up the lymphatic system. Step two, make sure that oxygen or nutrients and circulation are flowing into that area. And then step three, you can also work with specific herbs to support the endocrine system and the thyroid. Okay. Right next to it is a small dot. That's your parathyroid. And again, we were saying how important the parathyroid gland is for calcium utilization. And you can see these squiggly lines also indicate a parathyroid weakness or a connective tissue weakness. And so one of my favorite things to work with in strengthening our connective tissue is, again, step one, alkalizing the body so that we're strengthening the tissues. Step two, cleaning up the lymphatic system with our astringent fruits, our tart cherries, opening up those elimination pathways, getting sweating, dry brushing, opening up the kidneys, and that will start to clean up all this white. So soon we'll start to see this white turn into blue eyes, and we'll start to see this brown turn into white. So it just goes in stages. And areas where it's really thick, you can see here, it's almost like a cloud with it's thick, it's layered on top of there. Whereas opposed to here, it's not as thick. So these thick areas are where you're going to have the most inflammation and congestion and pain. And then eventually it turns into the weakening of those glands. So this lymphatic congestion is just acid waste sitting on the tissues. And if you had, acid waste sitting on your skin, it would start to degenerate the skin, and then you'd wash it off and the skin would repair. So that's exactly what you're doing with your tissues, is you're cleansing out those acid wastes, and then the tissues go from a state of degeneration to a state of regeneration. So really neat and fun. Okay, so let's go through this eye together. Pituitary, let's see, I was going to say pituitary. Are these items you point out identical in both eyes? Okay, each eye shows different things. Your right eye and your left eye shows different things. And we'll go over that, but they do show the same organs and glands, and you'll see the patterns. So if you see weak adrenal glands in the right eye, you'll also see weak adrenal glands in the left eye, which just shows you where to focus. So this is really interesting. These dark spots, these are toxins that were passed down from multiple generations. And sometimes people will call them like a freckle in the eye, and they're on different organs. So this definitely takes some work to clean up. And again, it's by alkalizing your body, flooding your body with micronutrient dense foods, and really supporting those organs of elimination. So this takes time. But this, we're looking at the left eye, and the way that you can tell is that the pupil is closer to the left side versus the right. So this is the left eye. Does anybody know what the true color of this eye is? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Blue. Yes. So it is blue. And then anybody remember what these squiggly lines represent? So one, let's just go. Do you guys think this person has a strong constitution or a weak constitution? Strong. Yeah. Super strong constitution. The tissues are very close, tight knit. The squiggle in the eye shows exactly a parathyroid weakness. And that is showing that connective tissue weakness, which we can talk about how to support that. And then what region is this? Do you guys remember? So we go from the stomach area and the transverse colon, the descending colon over here, the sigmoid, and then the small intestine is over here, and that's where you're really absorbing your food. So yeah, the bowels, the colon. And the bowels, all of this is the head region, this upper region. But see how these lines, they're showing major toxicity in the bowel. And then these lines is where there's the degeneration of tissues from those toxins that are leading up into the pituitary gland, which again impacts all of our hormones, and the pineal gland over here, which is going to impact our sleep. And then can everybody see the rings of a tree, those adrenal glands? So that's showing the nervous system weakness and adrenal gland weakness. And if we look over here, their adrenal glands are right in here. So there is a lot of lymphatic congestion to work on in that area. And if we were to clean up this brown spot, which you can by cleaning up the lymphatic system, underneath it, you would see one of those tissue openings, one of those holes, and then you'd have to work on repairing that. So my favorite thing to work on that bone and connective tissue is like your dark leafy greens. So working with things like your alfalfa greens, your wheatgrass. The thing that I also really love is in the Renew Hair, Skin, and Nails that has your Hosho Wu. It has dandelion leaf, which is really great for that kidney filtration. It has saw palmetto berries, which is really good for your endocrine system. It has grape seed extract in it, which is amazing for cleaning up the lymphatic system. So, it really covers those bases, and it has herbs that support that bone and connective tissue. And then working with different greens, like alfalfa leaf juice is one of the strongest builders possible. And then your oat grass and all of those. So go into your green spectrum, and that's going to be rebuilding to the bone and connective tissue. And then if we look at, our collagen support pack that has the Renew Hair, Skin, and Nails, but it also has your berries and your dark berries and like pomegranates and beetroot and tart cherry and blueberries and bilberries and all of these dark, rich, astringent fruits, which are going to support cleaning up that lymphatic system. But your berries are the best thing for your brain and your nervous system. And then the dark berry formulation also has the lion's mane. It also has the grapeseed extract for cleaning up the lymphatic system, as well as ginkgo and incredible herbs for the brain and nervous system. So that's a huge just win, an amazing thing to look at. And I want to look at some of these other formulations, and then I'll open it up to questions because there's just so much that we can learn here. You can get into every system of the body. Over here, you're also, getting into the spine. So this person deals with pain in their lower sacrum, and you can see that in their lymphatic congestion. This person also is dealing with a lot of congestion on their ovaries. So it's important to clean this up to support the health of their ovaries. They've also have a lot of the congestion in their heart region and a little bit of tissue weakness in that area. So working with all the systems we talked about, and then great circulatory herbs and heart herbs are going to be important for this person as well. And then we talked about, the parathyroid weakness that we see here, but that's also demonstrated in this line. So supporting their small intestine, which actually supports their absorption, cleaning up their bowels, and that's also going to impact the health of their parathyroid gland. And I want to zoom in here if I can. Doesn't look like I have that ability, but there's a brown hue around the pupil. And anytime there's a brown hue around the pupil, it's showing malabsorption. And so we can be eating a lot of calories and not actually absorbing any of it. And so that's where that biomedic, again, is really helpful for our absorption. But also when you're flooding your body with nutrient-dense foods, with alkaline forming foods, it allows for cellular absorption to happen. And what's happening and what we're seeing in so many is this malabsorption, where we're not actually absorbing our nutrients at that cellular level, which leads to cellular starvation, which leads to a fight or flight stress response, which impacts our adrenal glands and our nervous system. So getting that absorption is really important. And that's why I love, the superfood and the transformation that so many of us are doing. Is it's raw, it's living, it's wind dehydrated, it's in an easily absorbable form that your cells are going to take in. that information. So that's really huge for working with absorption. And the main goal here that I hope you guys are getting is that, one, we're just dealing with overtoxicity in our tissues. And those tissues, that overtoxicity of our tissues lives in our lymphatic system. So if we can clean that up, we can start to strengthen and tone all of our organs and connective tissues. And then we can really work with specific areas by working with different bowel herbs, by working with different brain and nervous system herbs, by working with reproductive herbs. And so that's where you really start to have a big breakthrough. And so our endocrine system, which I also wanted to briefly talk about, because we talked about our pineal gland, which produces our melatonin. We talked about our thyroid and our parathyroid. And those are so important because it helps with that calcium utilization. But also, if we have a low thyroid function, it leads to hair loss and cold hands and, a lack of bone density, the scoliosis we talked about. Hot flashes, excess weight that's hard to lose. So we really want to support the health of the tissues to transform that. And then your thymus gland, you guys can just pat on your chest. It's right here. I like to give it 10 pats and that activates your thymus gland. And that's really a huge part of your immune function. And then we talked about your adrenal glands, which live on top of your kidneys. And in order to get that kidney filtration to clean up that lymphatic system, we have to support our adrenal glands because our kidneys and our adrenals work together. And your adrenal glands produce neurotransmitters. It impacts your nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system. It helps us to produce progesterone. So it really balances out all of our hormones. And then you have your pancreas. And that, that you have a weakened pancreas. We can see it on the eyes, but you have a weakened pancreas if you're seeing undigested food in your stools. So there's some amazing herbs you can work with for your pancreas. And that's really important because it helps to produce our insulin. So anytime we see adrenal weakness and pancreas weakness, we start to see diabetes and prediabetes. So it's really important, again, for that absorption and digestion, because it's what produces our enzymes for us to break down our food. But luckily, a lot of us that are doing the transformation are working with those living foods, which have those living enzymes. The next, for women, we have our ovaries. And when our adrenal glands are down, what we see is there's estrogen dominance, which results in cysts and fibroids and cancers. So that's why it's so important to support these adrenal glands long term. And again, we little babies can have adrenal weakness because it's passed down from multiple generations. 2-year-olds can have adrenal weakness. So like the Kids in Focus is my favorite formulation for supporting kids with their adrenal health and their endocrine system health, their emotional well-being, their nervous system. And then for males, we have the testes, which produce testosterone and help with muscle growth. And but when the adrenal glands are weakened, there's too much testosterone production. So it really impacts our male and female reproductive health. And then we can go through the different formulations that I love for the different systems, but a couple that I just want to go through is the Super Love Meal has some of my favorite endocrine system herbs. So it has like your alfalfa leaf, your wheatgrass, your barley grass, your spirulina, your chlorella, that dandelion leaf. And again, all of those are amazing for the bone and connective tissue when we're seeing that parathyroid weakness. And then it has all of your sprouts. So it has like red clover, flax, amaranth, but all of those are sprouted. So those are living foods. And again, those are really strengthening to your tissues and specifically your bone and connective tissue. But then it gets into the mushroom blend and it has your cordyceps, which are really powerful for your adrenal glands and supporting that kidney filtration. It has shiitake mushroom in it, which is amazing for your immune system. Turkey tail is great for your immune system. Maca is great for your endocrine system. And then we have just like parsley, which is incredible for your kidney filtration. Eleuthero root, one of my all-time favorite adrenal gland formulations. And then why I love the can't beat this, besides the cellular energy that it produces, which leads to cellular repair and leads to the elimination of wastes. It also has things like your eleuthero root, which is for your adrenal glands. It has moringa, which is amazing for rebuilding the bones and connective tissue. It has rhodiola, which is my other favorite adrenal formulation. And then we get into cleaning up that lymphatic system. We talked about the biofruit and the pomegranate and the lemon and the beet, the ossarilla cherry, the cranberry, the strawberries, the raspberries, all of that is going to clean up the lymphatic system. And the only thing I recommend with fruit is eating it on an empty stomach, because that's when it's going to go towards repair and cleansing in the body. If we eat fruit when we're full, fruit digests really quickly. So if it's sitting on top of food, other food that digests much more slowly, it ferments, and that can lead to, fungal and candida overgrowth in the body. But when you eat it on an empty stomach, it works to clean up the lymphatic system, produce that cellular ATP, and strengthen those cells and tissues, especially your endocrine system. And then the dark berry, I just wanted to highlight a few things in there because it has the black currant, again, great for cleaning up the lymphatic system. All of the dark berries are the best thing for the brain. The blueberries, the blackberries, it has the lion's mane mushroom, which is one of my favorite nervous system regeneration herbs. It also has your ginkgo leaf, which is amazing for brain and nervous system. So let me just go back to some of these slides and just show, like, this is all brain and nervous system region. So I would be working on cleaning up the lymphatic system here and working with brain herbs. I also love the Revive It All for your brain herbs. And then again, we can strengthen all of these tissues. We just have to clean up the lymphatic system and bring circulation and nutrients and oxygen to these areas. And then we can work on getting that stronger, those stronger tissues. So I'm gonna open it up to questions. I know that's like a lot of information, but was that helpful for you guys to actually see what's happening in the body, and learn a little bit more about yourself and your eyes? And what I love, fascinating and scary. Yes. What I is very insightful about this work is we all have so much work to do, and it's not something to worry or be afraid of. Like, we all have amazing tools and resources. And what I've found is if I can focus on just getting 80% alkalinity into my diet on a daily basis, that's working on strengthening my tissues and cleaning up that lymphatic system. And if I can get fresh fruit, ripe fruit in before every single meal, then that's going to work on creating that cellular energy and ATP that cleans up that lymphatic system and strengthens all those organs and glands and tissues, and really supports the brain and nervous system and the endocrine system. And that endocrine system impacts the health of every other organ and tissue in our body. So there's so much we can do to strengthen our body and strengthen our genetics and pass off stronger genes than which we inherited. Okay, yes. So what does it mean? I do have a cholesterol picture here. Let me see. Okay, so somebody was asking what happens if there's a white ring along the skin ring. And what does that show? You can start to see it's coming here. Sometimes it's like a blue halo, but people also get a white cholesterol ring throughout different parts of the body. And a cholesterol ring is actually trying to protect your body from acidosis. So acidosis comes from toxins, it comes from cellular wastes, but it also comes from acid forming foods that leave an acid ash of minerals. And so most foods are acid forming, but the main alkaline forming foods are your fruits, your veggies, and your herbs. So it's just making sure you get a good balance and plenty of fruits and veggies and herbs. If we're eating all processed food, if we're eating all, an abundance of grains, 90% grains and processed foods, we're getting pretty much all acid forming foods, sugars, all of that, processed sugars. And so your body protects itself from these acids by a few ways. One is producing cholesterol, and that buffers the acids. So it's protecting itself from that acid waste. So that just shows us if there's a cholesterol ring, we have to immediately work on cleaning up the lymphatic system and open up those kidney pathways to get those acids out. And then that cholesterol ring will go away once you get an alkaline chemistry and start flooding the body with those alkaline nutrients. So that was a great question. Yay. Any other questions before we close it out? And I just want to say, if someone invited you to this call, thank you so much for coming. If you want to learn more about regenerative health or iridology, or micronutrient dense foods, or, the superfood transformation that we're doing right now, in our New Year's transformation, just connect in with the person that invited you, and they can connect you to the resources and the education and support you. Let's see. Yes, there will be a replay of this, and there are some amazing clinical iridologists on this call. If somebody wants to get their eyes read. It's really insightful because it just gives you that roadmap. And for me, my takeaways for my eye was, okay, I really need to work on my bowel health, which I worked on. I really need to work on my parathyroid gland, because that was my main weakness. And in doing that, I was able to regenerate so much. And then I had huge adrenal weakness that I had to address. And it took me a couple of years to address it because my adrenals were so depleted. So and that was just, doing adrenal support every few months and then taking a break and coming back to it. So the other adrenal support that I love is our Be Energetic. That's like my favorite. And then the Kids in Focus for kids. Does the darkness of the eye color mean anything? I have exceptionally dark brown eyes. Yes. So the darker it is, the more chronic lymphatic congestion is there. And some people who appear to have brown eyes actually have true blue eyes. And it's just like, that was my mom's case. I thought she always had brown eyes, but she actually has true blue eyes. And as she cleaned up the lymphatic system, her eyes went from brown to green to blue. So, and no, you don't have to be in person to have your eyes read. You can email a picture of your right eye and your left eye with good lighting into an iridologist, and you can get in touch with someone here. So yeah, love it. It's very insightful. And if you guys know anybody that this information can support, please feel free to share. Let's see, I was diagnosed with a neurological issue and a bunch of other complex issues. So neurological, again, comes back to supporting that nervous system health and that adrenal health. So definitely connect in with the person that invited you to get deeper support. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We will definitely do another one of these because there's so much information. And yeah, just show some more examples of before and afters and what's possible. So I hope you guys have a beautiful evening. Again, please just connect in with the person that invited you and we'll get you all supported in any of your goals. I hope you guys have a beautiful evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.